Hello and welcome to TechFunnel.com's interview series. My name is Danny White, and today we have the opportunity to talk to Tony Restell. Tony is the founder of SocialHire.com and has spent nearly 20 years helping recruitment teams to fully exploit digital marketing, from the early days of job board advertising and email campaigns through to the latest in social media marketing initiatives and retargeting campaigns. He's a published author and guest speaker on LinkedIn and social media at business schools across Europe. Welcome, Tony. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on the call, Danny. Looking forward to sharing lots of insights.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and what drew you initially to consulting and using social media for recruitment.
So consulting really came about. I studied at Cambridge University, and at the time, consulting and investment banking were really the two fast track career paths that people took out of university. And for me, I'd always wanted to run my own business. So I saw consulting as the chance to get inside lots of businesses, see the challenges they were facing, the mistakes they were making, the opportunities they were exploiting, and hopefully give myself a good education in business to be able to set up for myself.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you initially worked in consulting for several years before wanting to break out and do your own thing. What helped to inspire you to maybe leave your job and start Top Consultant and eventually Social Hire?
So I'd always had that drive that I wanted to have my own business. There was a sort of timing factor at play. Mm-hmm. So when I got to the point of having spent a few years in strategy consulting, it was right around the time that we had the .com boom. For those on the call, they're old enough to remember that. And you had, particularly in the States, lots of niche job board businesses really taking off and being very successful. So you had the broad job boards, places you could go to look for any kind of job. Mm-hmm. But then you also had things like Volt and Wet Feet in the US that were very targeted on particular professions and industries that people wanted to get into. Mm-hmm. And I looked at this with one of my colleagues, and we just saw that no one was really doing the same thing in the UK at the time. In Europe. So, I'd always had that drive, then saw that opportunity, and that was all I needed to take the jump. And then really, Social Hire is an evolution of that, if you like. So, I spent, over 10 years growing Top Consultant, selling the business to a newspaper group here in the UK, and then staying on for a couple of years as an executive in that business. But during that time, I saw more and more businesses, shifting a portion of all of their spend into social media channels as a way of reaching candidates. And so it was natural for me to, evolve with what the market was doing. Mm-hmm. Continue serving that recruitment agency audience as it was at the time, and help them with figuring out how to market their businesses on social media.
What were some of the common challenges that you ran into when you were consulting, and some of those challenges that consultants today have when it comes to even selling their services?
I mean, my time in consulting was as a generalist. So you spend your first few years in consulting just working across totally different industries, mm-hmm. totally different challenges. So you couldn't really, draw any commonalities, if you like, but it's a great exposure to business. Mm-hmm. In terms of how consultants struggle to sell consulting services, I mean, that's a huge issue in the industry. Because consulting firms tend to hire, bright college graduates, business school graduates who spend the first few years of their careers working on consulting projects, mm-hmm. but never having sold a single thing in their lives.
Right.
And that's totally the opposite to a lot of career paths. Mm-hmm. So, if you go and join a Procter and Gamble or a Unilever, straight from college, then you're probably going to spend the first few years of your career actually out there trying to sell and account manage.
Mm-hmm.
And only once you've done a few years of that are you then, do you get the keys to then be able to go and work on business challenges. Consulting is totally the opposite. And so you reach a stage in your career in consulting where to date you've never sold anything.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you've got to switch on the ability to be able to sell. And that is a big challenge in consulting. And a lot of people leave the consulting sector at that point because it's just not something they are suited to or that they enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Was there an industry in particular that you liked working in over another?
I mean, it's really fascinating because I worked across all sorts of industries. I loved the airline industry just because I got to travel lots in style at the kind of age where I could appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
What was fascinating was, as I was coming to the end of my time in consulting, we were starting to pitch for work with, companies who are now the biggest names in the internet, but that were, only fledgling businesses at that time. So I remember, for example, I had to come up with a pitch deck for what would future retailers look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I was coming up with concepts like, we would all be able to track at home what shopping items we'd consumed, what we needed to replenish the next time we were doing a shop online, that those stores would, memorize the kind of things that you like to buy and propose to you,
mm-hmm.
baskets of things you could buy from them again in the future. And, you sort of look forward and it's those kinds of things that have come to pass. So, that was really fascinating to me. And it was part of what, made me want to get into launching an internet business for myself.
Very cool. So you've used social media. You've been very successful at using social media and the various platforms there. What do you think holds recruitment companies back from getting better results through social media?
I think there are two things, and they're interrelated.
Mm-hmm.
The first of them is that you get the best results on social media if you take time to build business relationships with people, to interact with people, to have conversations, to make social media a means of getting meetings with people, getting coffee meetings, getting sales meetings, meeting people at conferences, that sort of
mm-hmm.
thing. It's a great door opener. A lot of recruitment businesses have taken to social media as a means of promoting their businesses. And so when you look at lots of recruitment companies, their social media streams are just, an endless flow of the latest vacancies they're advertising. So they're very much using it as a promotional channel rather than a social channel.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think is one of the biggest shortcomings. And in part, I understand this. I've worked with recruitment businesses for, 20 years or so. A lot of the sector is understandably quite short-termist, because, they only get paid if they make placements, if they make hires,
mm-hmm.
in the next few weeks. And so there does tend to be in the industry a focus on things that produce very short-term results,
right,
versus things that are good strategic things for the business to be doing for the medium and long term.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the real, challenge is with recruitment and social media. To get the most out of it, you have to invest in it for the medium term. But there's always the temptation to just push out a few more posts to try and win a bit of business today,
mm-hmm.
or to try and, get some candidates referred to you today. But that is, goes against the long-term interest of the business.
Right. You really advocate for using LinkedIn as a tool for building both a career and a business. How has LinkedIn evolved over the past few years since you started using it?
Yeah, I was looking back actually, and I was one of the first users.
Mm-hmm.
You see your user number on LinkedIn, and I was one of the really low numbers. And it's moved on so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, something that anyone who's used LinkedIn in the last years will remember is when you connected with someone, only a couple of years ago, you were prompted, how do you know this person?
Right.
And you had to enter, I used to work with this person, or I went to college with this person, et cetera, et cetera. And it was very much a platform for people to stay in touch with people that were close business contacts. And that, I think, is where LinkedIn has really changed over the last years. Now LinkedIn allow you to have 30,000 connections. They've done away with the requirement to, state how it is someone. So it's now much more of a platform where you can build relationships in your industry, not necessarily with people you already know, but with people that, long term are going to be really valuable for you in your career or for you in the business you're trying to grow. And so that's just it's a huge change on the platform.
Are there some tips you would give to entrepreneurs and marketers who are aiming to amplify their presence on LinkedIn or even other social platforms for that matter? I know with a lot of B2B marketers, especially, LinkedIn is the primary platform that we tend to use, but are there other suggestions that you have for other platforms as well?
It's funny. I had an exchange with someone who runs a recruitment business on LinkedIn in the last couple of weeks, joking just about this. And we said, if you were to ask a recruiter, would they rather have 5 good phone conversations with great candidates or clients, or would they rather 50 candidates or clients went and visited their website? And we joked between us and we said, every single recruiter would want the 5 phone conversations because the chances of getting, winning business or placing a candidate off the back of that, much, much greater, from actually talking to people, versus just getting them to go, and check out a page on your website. And yet when you think about what the majority of people do on social media, it's actually to shy away from trying to start conversations and to focus on trying to push people to visit certain web pages on your website. And that examples with recruitment, but I would say, that actually applies across sectors. The single biggest things you need to focus on, I would say, well, firstly, having an end goal in mind. So what do you want your companies or your own individual presence on social media to deliver for you? For some people, it might be all about brand awareness and being the biggest name in your industry. For others, it might be, we want this to generate sales leads for our business. We want this to generate speaking engagements that our consulting partner is invited to speak at key industry conferences. We want this to be a source of people booking in for our next business breakfast because that's how we win all our business. So if you start with that end goal in mind, then the key factors really are, firstly, how many of the right people do you reach on social media? And by reach, I mean, they see you, they see your posts, that they are prompted to have interactions with you. And then secondly, how effective are you at converting that reach into end results? And I've seen businesses who fail on social media. They've got quite good at, growing their audience, their reach with the kinds of businesses they want to be doing business with. But they then expect social media to deliver something for the business that's completely unattainable. So if I give you an example of that, imagine you've got a business. Well, Social Hire is a great example, actually. No one ever buys our services from our website.
Correct.
Every single customer we've ever had, bar one, has needed a phone call with us first to talk through, what it would be like to work with us, what we think the opportunity is for their business, etc. So if we were to use social media to drive people to a sales page where they're expected to buy our services, just put their credit card and pay, we would get nothing from social media.
Right.
But because we recognize that everyone wants to either see us present on a webinar or speak to us on a consultation call, as we interact with people on social media, that's what we encourage them to do. And so social media then for us becomes, a regular stream of new client interest that converts then into new business for us. So to sort of bring that back to your question, what I would encourage business owners to focus on is having that end goal in mind. And then for each platform, really focusing on how do you increase your reach? And, you mentioned LinkedIn there as an example. There are things you do on LinkedIn at the moment that really accelerate how much you're seen on LinkedIn. If you can get lots of engagement on your posts, if you're posting videos, or posting helpful tips and ideas that people in your industry can benefit from, all these things tend to get a lot more visibility on LinkedIn and tend to generate a lot more engagement, which then keeps your post in the feed, for days and days and days on end. Versus pushing out, promotional messages or links to sales pages on your site, which disappear from the feed within an hour. So you can have a business totally fail on social media because they just haven't understood how the platforms they're on actually reward you for your activities or punish you for your activities, depending on whether you're doing the right things or not.
Absolutely.
And then, the conversion side, don't expect social media to achieve something for your business that no other channel is achieving at present.
Right.
If no other channel gets you to buy online from a sales page without talking to someone, then don't expect social media to do that. Plug social media into what already works.
Gotcha. Good advice. So switching to the entrepreneurial side now, what are some of your key points of advice for entrepreneurs who are thinking about starting their own business within consulting or within social media or even technology as you have?
Yeah, I would make a real distinction here between a known, proven business model and branching out and launching something that's pretty much untested, where you're actually creating a market for something. And my businesses have all been creating something that more or less doesn't exist. We were literally one of the very first social media agencies out there. So we were assuming there would be a market for these services. We were figuring out what the price points would be, what the offering would need to be. Whereas if you were entering that market today, then obviously, there's several years of track record of what are people prepared to pay for these services? What kind of services do they want? What are they most interested in social media delivering for the business? So I think, and we work with loads of small businesses. We talked a lot about recruitment, but we actually work with small businesses that want to generate leads or website traffic or interest in their business. And that actually means we end up working with a lot of startups and early stage businesses. And I would say for that type of business, my top piece of advice is to get into the market as quickly as you can. There tends to be a lot of focus, particularly amongst anyone who's trying to raise, any kind of investment, to really nail your business plan and to put a lot of time into researching that and getting the right numbers in that. Right. And I think that's really valid where you're building something like a consulting business that already exists, where the business model is already known. But when you're in a new business, an early stage business that's maybe exploiting a totally new market, developing something that doesn't exist at the moment, then the most important thing you can do is get into the market as quickly as possible. Because almost every business I've worked with that's done that has learned things about the market, within the first months of trying to sell their offering, talking to potential customers, that's really caused them to pivot the business.
Right.
And learned something that was a fundamental flaw in their assumptions about what customers would want or what they'd be prepared to pay for it. That's allowed them to then, in a lot of cases, carve out a successful business by learning from that, that experience and that feedback. Whereas if you spend too long on the business planning stage, you could lose months of time, and obviously the money that goes into you spending that time, actually perfecting an idea that is fundamentally flawed. So my advice for anyone coming up with something new is to come up with, a minimum viable product or service, get that out to market, and do as much testing of what the market is prepared to pay and what they would like to buy, as early on as possible. I'd contrast that with setting up a business in something established. You know, if I had gone from working in a consultant to launching my own consulting business, then it's very much about understanding what does the business model of a consulting firm look like. You know, how do you leverage teams? How do you leverage the partners? How do you maximize your billing rates? And then figuring out, you know, what is your niche in that market and making sure you launch that, you know, as effectively as possible. So really figure out which of those two types of businesses you're launching, and then, you know, adapt how you go about launching accordingly.
Awesome. Very good advice. Where can people find out more about you and your own businesses and the books that you've written?
So very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. So Tony Restell. My Twitter handle is @TonyRestell. And if you want to have a look at Social Hire and book in for a consultation call with us there, the URL for that is social-hire.com. So it'll be great to speak with lots of you there. And from there, you know, can send you loads of resources on webinars you can join, training courses you can attend, free resources for figuring out how to use social media and those kinds of things.
Awesome. Tony, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great conversation. Thanks for sharing all your insights and advice with us and our audience. Guys, thanks for listening to this interview. For these and other interviews and topics, please visit techfunnel.com. You can connect with us across social media on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our weekly newsletter so you can stay up to date on everything that's happening in the industry. Thank you. Thank you again, Tony.
Thanks a lot, Danny. Thanks, everyone.